different perspective. Today we have the honor, privilege, and pleasure to host two guys from Macedonia. That's Niks and Petar. Guys, welcome to the Agora.
Hello.
Pleasure to be with you.
Amazing. So for our viewers, just a short introduction. The guys are part of the boycott movement, or in Macedonian, Движење boycottiram, which is a grassroots civil rights movement, which spontaneously formed in August, I think, 2019, previous year. And the movement was basically a reaction to the outrageous acting of the Macedonian government to illegally renamed the country into the Republic of North Macedonia, against the interest of the Macedonian citizens, I would say, not only the Macedonian people. So, guys, I think the best thing to do right now is to pass the ball on your side and, tell us something about yourselves, tell us something about the movement, the boycott, and how you fit into the political picture of Macedonia at the moment.
Nikс, you want to go first?
Yeah. Well, the reason why we are called the boycott movement was because we, as you said, we formed up as a grassroots movement in the beginning, in the summer of 2019, when there was a referendum with regard to the name change. Now, it was obvious to every patriot, to everyone involved, really, that the referendum would be fake. It would be the result would be tampered with or even ignored. So the logic was, we're going to boycott it, which would by law make it inconclusive, and therefore no decision could be made on the basis of an inconclusive referendum. And miraculously, you could say, we were successful. There was no census with regard to the referendum, and it has been published in the official Gazette of the Republic of Macedonia that the referendum is inconclusive because there has been no census. So from a legal aspect, we done and effed the government over as the unofficial. I wouldn't call him a leader. He's just the loudest guy of all of our movement. Sasho, he's not here with us because of family obligations. But as he said it, we were given a very rude question as a people. A rude question was posed to us. Do you want to destroy your national identity and abrogate your ancient name? And we answered to it rudely, with a very rude, deafening silence. Now, we coalesced into something even bigger when then the following year, in the year of 2019, we had presidential elections here in Macedonia, and both candidates, one was a pro name change candidate, and the other was a sort of a mitigationist, as the people in the West would say, a conservative. Well, the same people, the same boycott movement now decided to boycott the presidential elections, and we were unfortunately unsuccessful. There was a census, though we have reports of the two major parties working together to falsify the census for the presidential elections. We would have made them likewise inconclusive, and the goal was to destabilize the political process, to avoid legitimizing this new political entity, which they call N Macedonia. We call it the N word. It is more offensive than the American N word is to black people, because it is not affirmatory of an identity. It is negatory of our identity. And of course, we then moved on to the parliamentary elections, which were supposed to be held this spring, but weren't due to the coronavirus. And we decided, because there is no census for parliamentary elections, it could be two guys voting, they would still be legal. Okay, we're going to field our own candidates. And many of us actually came forth as candidates. I came out as a candidate. Petar, he was also he was a candidate list leader, because we have proportional elections. We don't have the first past the post system. We have proportional representation and electorate. So we have list leaders. Petar was a list leader in the 5th electoral district, and we tried to attain enough signatures to secure ballot access. We were unfortunately unsuccessful, though we will say there has been a significant degree of sabotage and a massive negative campaign against us from leading conservative and liberal media heads. There was even a hit piece specifically on me, trying to frame me as an insane monarchist type. And I will say I'm not insane. I am, however, a monarchist for the time being. Well, I'm a little crazy, but I wouldn't call myself insane. So
Niks, to
that
be
is the
honest with you,
story.
I think that we live in quite insane times. So go with the flow is something we have to do occasionally, even if that's in a small measure, just to adopt.
I think that there is a Serbian saying, "Ko ne poludi nije normalan." Who doesn't go crazy is not normal. So yeah, I think that is one way of putting it. Petar, do you have anything to add? This was really just the bare bones history of who we are.
The only thing that I would add here is that um, the movement was created. Our movement was created sort of as a response to the fact that really Macedonians felt that they had no political representation left in the political scene in Macedonia, because on the one side we have one party that was forcing these illegitimate agreements with our neighbors, and then we had on the other side the opposition party that didn't even really oppose those agreements, but was engaged in kind of normalizing these agreements and kind of um, trying to explain to the people that this is some sort of a political reality that has to be accepted. And the movement was born out of the necessity of having some kind of political representation for Macedonians that refused to accept these agreements because they were forced on us. They were illegitimately, illegally. How do you say? They were illegally
Enforced. The results of the outcome of the
not even
referendum.
enforced. They actually they were put into law with an illegal procedure. As Nick said, they ignored a negative referendum. So really, the movement was a response to that kind of political climate in Macedonia.
Right. So you definitely believe that first and foremost, there is a procedural legal injury inside the political system in Macedonia, which
Absolutely.
just went straight forward without anyone. I reckon there were questionings coming from the major political players in Macedonia. What was the stance of the biggest oppositional party at that time, the IMRO, the Democratic Party for the Macedonian National Unity?
They started their initial position was this is an illegal, this is an illegal move by the political party that didn't actually win the election, but by making this legal maneuver in creating a coalition with the winning Albanian party, they basically put themselves into a position where they would be able to elect a government, but then the opposition party started doing all kinds of obstructions within the legal framework of our parliament, and that all culminated in one day where we had people who were protesting the agreements, and not specifically the agreements, the whole idea of talking to our neighbors and being kind of involved in a bunch of compromises that have to do with our national identity, the name of our country, the name of basically our history and culture. So there was one day where there was a big kind of I would say the people went into the parliament and we had a little bit of a security crisis, and out of that kind of really volatile political situation, the um, the um, the political party that was forcing these changes to the structure, basically, of the country, they kind of in opposition with the law and the procedure and the rule of law, they established the parliament, a parliamentary majority, which is disputed to this very day, because there are no official documents that are required to declare a constitutional majority that basically then elects a speaker. So all of that stuff started beginning with 27th of April 2017. We are in this state where everyone sort of knows that this is an illegal situation, that the company,
Well, it is
state.
being run. No, it is being run as a company. From what I read about Macedonian politics, it's not this so-called entity. It's not run as a normal country. It's run as a company belonging to one family. So actually, you're pretty straightforward
It's
here.
run, actually, it's run, if we're taking the analogy company, it's run like a company which is owned by the Macedonian people. That's the family, but being busted out by the mafia. If people in the audience or you guys have seen The Sopranos, you should watch that second season episode called Bust Out, where Tony and the guys move into um, Dave Scatino's sports store and basically go through the business like termites, consume all of its capital value, and liquidate it for short-term profit. This is what is being done to Macedonia. If Macedonia were a company, it would be basically being run by someone who is consuming all the capital which has been accumulated over the years, over the centuries, and selling it for very short-term profit. So, in that sense, yes, like a company.
Yes, that's why I pointed out that I think Petar is definitely spot on. Probably that's a thought which was just floating around his subconsciousness. So it
Yes,
came
maybe,
out in the right time, definitely.
maybe.
Guys, into the bigger context of the Macedonian question, and yeah, according to every single legal argument, yeah, illegal dismantling of the Macedonian state. What was the stand of the international community regarding the issue?
Um, I would say this. There's some discussion in Macedonia about this. There are different sides of the argument. Some people think this is the project of the international community. They think this entire kind of situation was somehow orchestrated by the international community, um, because we had a bunch of EU representatives coming in with support of the agreement. We had, ambassadors coming up with support for convincing us to basically make some kind of compromise with our neighbors. So there is the question that the international community definitely had a side, or I should say, the representative of the international community definitely took a side in this whole kind of situation, and it was definitely not the side that would protect the civilizational, rights of the Macedonian people. So uh, I'm more of a I have a different theory about this whole thing. I
Oh,
think
by all means, feel free to share it. Like the Warden Post and the Agora encourage freedom of speech as a civilizational
I
contribution,
think
which should be exercised.
yes, it's my opinion that this is mostly the work of the our neighborhood. How, how do you call these security forces? Not security forces.
Oh, the clandestine organizations and
Security services,
state
state
security
security
Yes,
services,
yes,
right?
that's the word.
organizations. Yes.
Security services of our neighbors, each of which have a vested interest in the Macedonian name, heritage, language, or history. And I think it was a perfect storm of these different interests that crossed in this one point in time, and helped elect this really corrupt political how do you say, political party that the only reason they were supported and elected with all kind of political and unlawful machinations. I think the only reason they were elected was to basically just accept anything that they were offered without any real opposition. So
I think it's really interesting to point out how outrageous it is that the Social Democratic Union in Macedonia was even allowed to form a government. I mean, the result of the last elections were pretty clear, at least from the manifestation of political will of the Macedonian electorate, right, which undoubtedly supported the Democratic Party for Macedonian national unity, right, the conservative
it
biggest
was
party in the country.
to be fair, it was unusually close. If you look at the elections before, um, the Vmro party, which is the opposition right now, had a huge, massive difference of votes. And then starting around 2014, I think the party that's in power now, which is the SDSM party, together with the security forces from our neighbors, they were engaged in this long-term special warfare operation, where they had they were problematizing every step of the government in the previous government of Macedonia, and they were basically making a scandal out of everything. They poured a lot of money into non-governmental organizations that were organizing activists to, block traffic, make all kinds of.
Do you think it was a similar scenario which we saw in Serbia and the Arab Spring, right? Is this typical?
It was a similar script, and this is why this is actually one of a point of disagreement that I have with Petar, and that is also characteristic of our movement. We are a pluralistic big tent movement. We unite people of multiple political ideologies and viewpoints. Peter is, I think he's more like a libertarian. I'm a nationalist, a very hard right nationalist, in fact. But we are in this thing together because this is an attack on us as Macedonians. But as to the fall of the previous government, there was definitely help from the outside, whether it was just the security services of our neighboring countries, or if they had assistance from America and the European Union, which I believe they did. Peter disagrees. There was definitely the assistance of at least the U.S. Embassy and British Embassy in Skopje, in Macedonia.
I agree with that. I agree that the embassy
So
help.
at least that.
Yes.
I have a different theory. I think that this originated with the State Department of the United States.
I would agree with that too. But but the disagreement that me and Nik's have is that I don't consider that to be a long-term goal of the American foreign policy. I think it was something that was undertaken within the State Department, as we see in many places. The State Department seems to be, seems to have a mind of its own, and in different places of the world, it affects the local political situation in different ways. And I think that's what happened. I don't think there was a long-term strategy in the U.S. to say we have to convince Macedonia to give up its name, history, or culture. I think it was, it was more local.
The long-term strategy is to integrate the quote-unquote Western Balkans into NATO and the European Union, and this was one way of doing it, a very ham-fisted and very basically self-destructive way. Because, I mean, I have spoken to people, let's say we are now, I think, members of NATO. I completely shut out of the whole thing because it's just so painful for me. But I have spoken to men who are soldiers, Macedonian soldiers, and they're saying there is complete demoralization in the army. if you told us there is going to be war, more than 70% of the men will just desert.
Desert.
What?
Desert. Yeah.
Yeah, they would just, and it wasn't a Grant who told me this in like an infantryman. This was a special forces soldier who told me this. People who should be the hardest, and Macedonian special
most
forces are actually
dedicated one, I think.
fairly tough. They are enviable. People were saying, "Oh, what does NATO want with Macedonia?" Well, they want our special forces. They are really one of the best in Europe. And the special forces, if the special forces are that demoralized, you can tell that basically NATO is going to get nothing out of Macedonia. In fact, we might even have a negative impact on NATO, just by the way that this was all done. And I'm not a big fan of NATO, but if you're going to expand, at least do it right. But yes, I will agree. The the blueprint, the script was very similar to the Arab Spring, to the riots we're seeing in America today, and to the thing in Ukraine, which what did they call it? Euromaidan.
The Maidan uprising, right?
Right. It was a very similar script. There was ideological and media cover, moral cover from the embassies of the